the habit of when they went to the toilet. You're live streaming this, so I'm not going to tell this story anymore.
Before we got it. Another time, Kieran.
No, we can't fall into that stereotype of always talking about autistic children's toilet and how it's not. I can't do that.
I've gone purple now.
Oopsie.
It's always hello and welcome to people out there in Facebook land. I am aware that all of our live streams start with various ends of odd conversations. The last one started with me saying, now stop trying to confess about your murders, and then this one started with us talking about poop. It was me moaning about poop in my life. So hello and welcome people in Facebook. We will stop talking about both murders and poop unless either of those are relevant. We are here tonight. We're off to a good start. We are here tonight with myself, Ruth from Autistic Parents UK. I've got Rachel with us as well, who is one of our regulars with Autistic Parents UK. One of my little people might well be popping in to say hello tonight. That's fine. And then we've got the beautiful Kieran Rose and marvellous Tanya Adkin.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Like, as a person, you know, I have a select amount of adjectives and I just circulate them. So tonight,
a real compliment. You just ran out of adjectives.
Wheel of adjectives. You got
the Wheel of Fortune. Which one will it add on tonight?
Serious questions. We have had some questions come in. Hang on just a second. Let me get into the right page. Here we are, because we had a few. Yes. Oh, yes. I've got a couple of questions as well that link back to Tanya's wonderful webinar. Tanya came on last minute, but I actually have some people who either attended your webinar and then had some residual questions, or weren't able to attend. So there's a couple of kind of
brilliant.
Is it a bad idea to tell your kid's educational psychologist that you, the parent, are autistic?
Yes. Yes.
What do you do?
I don't want to say yes. I shouldn't have to say yes. But the way that we are going with institutionalising parent carer blame and the autism to FII pipeline, absolutely, unless there is, I mean, Kieran will probably kill me for this, but if you can mask your way through it and keep communication to a minimum and written, do it. Just because, you know, we look at, and I'm sure that Shona's commented on this before, but, you know, there's an awful lot of ableism around being autistic, the way that people respond to you. And even in the FII guidelines, it states that autistic parents are at risk of fee, which is not actually a thing. It was just a trumped up concept. So absolutely, yeah. Unless it's at a point where you are looking at institutionalized parent carer blame, and you need to do that as an explanation for adjustments, etc., etc. But always try and get, you know, as many teachers, etc., on side. It's like an evidence. You've got to build a fortress of evidence and support around you. So yeah, sad as that is.
Yeah, I mean, the only mitigation I'd add there is that there are a handful of ed psychs in England, and when I say a handful, I mean you can count them on that hand, that will validate you, and there's a couple that I know that are autistic. So the dynamic might change there, but obviously you're coming to these people as strangers and you might not know that unless you've actually gone out and been signposted to them as safe people. But mostly, as Tanya said, they're not, and you've got to keep yourself safe, and I wouldn't ever kill anyone for asking to keep themselves safe. That's you know, it's important that you protect yourself.
I mean, if you've sought out a private educational psychologist specifically for the purpose of going up against a local authority, then do it. But we have to remember that educational psychologists that are employed by the local authority have a massive conflict of interest right there. And the battle, you know, institutionalised parent carer blaming is used to gatekeep access to services and basically guard money.
Sorry, am I right? Yeah. Just from my perspective of current affairs of my own life, would be my realization that there is a pattern that exists within government departments, whichever one, and the pattern remains the same. So for me, it was very much about realizing that anybody who's employed by the government is likely not completely reliable in the sense of doing what I would believe to be sort of morally and their correctness, I guess. So for me, it was about allowing the LEA to feel a sense of that they could feed in their view, but then I would choose my people to feed in their view. And then anything that they said that came back to me, I would respond with typical sort of academic, I guess, quotes and references with sort of like, you know, peer reviewed research to sort of back it up. Because I've recently had a particular person who has a very strong influence on the decisions made by the local authority, and I would definitely say that researching anything that you can from autistic creators or bloggers or whoever, and people like Dr. Luke Bearden, and who else have I looked into? Well, I've talked about the double empathy because of them trying to parent blame me, and it has proved very useful. So that would be something that I would say is yourself with as much knowledge as you can about the subject of autism, so that you can choose these references to add to whatever you, I guess, put together to present to whoever you're challenging. Because that's about challenging and saying, because they'll say things like, in my opinion, this, and this, and then I'll say, you know, are you qualified, and can you specify and quantify what it is that you mean by this? And then there's no response, and you're like, hey. So anyway,
and that it wholly depends on the personality, like I was saying in the webinar as well. It depends on an awful lot of factors. It depends, the risk that you can take with your own disclosure is dependent on the position that you're coming from, very much so. I'm in a position where I'm quite well known and quite feisty, so I'm waiting for it. I would love it to happen, but they won't do that because they Google me. But other parents aren't, and by the time you've gotten to that level, you probably really are struggling, you know. And also the other question is, the educational psychologist is assessing your child from an educational perspective to see what their educational needs are. Why do they need to know about your neurology? You're essentially giving them a golden ticket to parent blame.
I wonder whether it would have come up if a child doesn't have a formal recognition of their neurotype and an autistic parent is recognizing that their child is autistic, then saying to the educational psychologist, I am coming at this from an informed viewpoint that my child has some autistic traits, and this is where my knowledge base is from, could be how it come up in conversation. But I agree with you from, you know, from that stance, but I can see how it would naturally come up.
Yeah, I mean, it would benefit, but yeah, we've also got to look at that, you know, if you disclose your you know, your neurology, you're already put in a position of testimonial injustice anyway. You know, so you saying, we see it in the groups constantly, you know, we are autistic, so therefore we have experience. Yes, but I'm an autism mum. So it's so different. In fact, I'm just writing about this actually for uni with, you know, I think that, you know, I'm looking at the figures and stuff, that 35% of GPs have never received formal autism training.
Right.
The figures that are coming out that are, and what the standard of that training is. I mean, I read some research that was saying that people are going on like daytime courses. Who's delivering this training? What is it based on? Is it based on old theory? But then what's happening is those people are being pitted as experts and training the next level down. And I think, what was it called? It was called like in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And that's what we're getting into. And then you explained that you're autistic. Even as a professional, I think I wrote about it a couple of months ago. I was speaking to an educational psychologist who was apparently a neurodiversity expert. Interesting. And I disclosed my own diagnosis because I slip into, when speaking about autistic experience, to the we, us, because it's a very community experience for me. And he had the gall to turn around as a professional after I'd just spoon-fed him his report and say that he didn't think I was autistic, and could I please provide examples of what made me think that.
What?
Oh yeah. In the end, he asked me if he could, So this is, they are really that, and this massive issue within local services such as NHSs and local authorities, that they come from it with this like massive ego thing, probably overhanging from the 70s, where they are the gold standard of service. They're not.
Yeah. And Tanya and I had that experience. We shared almost identical experiences on pretty much the same day, because we both put them out on Twitter at about the same time. And I had a very similar one. And it's, I mean, coming at it from a, you know, I'm autistic, so which means I know more than you. Generally, that is the case, even if it's someone knowing about themselves and in relation to their child. But when you have professionals who, on the most part, like Tanya said, are either not trained at all or are trained incompetently, they are seeing us as they see our children through that lens of deficit, through that lens of, you are incompetent because you're autistic. You cannot, you know, you're not good, and then therefore automatically not a good enough parent. You therefore automatically are going to be failing to communicate. You don't understand social behavior, all of those kind of things. All of that narrative just comes up in their head and then just immediately applies to you. So anything you say in relation to your child immediately undermines everything that you say, because you're as incompetent as your child is in their eyes. And even going back to what Rachel said earlier about people who work for local government being unreliable, that's such a good way of putting it, because even the best intentioned people, even the people who do get it and do work within local authorities and are trying to make changes, are still complicit in a system which is set to fail us, deliberately is designed to fail us. So therefore, you know, you cannot rely on anyone that works on it. Unfortunately, you cannot rely on anyone who works for a local authority. You cannot trust them, because even if they want to do their best by you, someone else might be telling them differently, and they have to do that or lose their jobs. Yep. So that's the way up. We had an experience where I appear very sort of like fluffy, like cotton wool, candy floss, you know, all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to like subjects that I'm confident with, I become a lot more confident, but it's always delivered with a smile. I should have probably been an air hostess. Not really. But I always think to myself, when we started this process, which was 4 years ago, it doesn't, you know, it feels like longer, but at the same time not. But I'm digressing, sorry. But basically, we now realise, having like looking back on the whole process, is that they believed that they were going to win, and that I was just going to roll over and let them tick me, and that I'd be a pushover. And we've sort of talked about what's happened recently and said, I think that they'd set out a plan because of assumptions that they had about what sort of person I was. And that has meant that they've fallen down a very dark, deep hole, and I'm standing above waving. But I'm not into it, obviously, because it's something that's happening soon. But I now see the people who were making me out to be the bad person, the one, you know, what they said I'm obstructing. But all of the things I'm coming back with all say otherwise, and prove them wrong, both legally and morally. And there's just so much evidence that I just keep feeding. And the response we're getting, you can just see that they're absolutely bricking themselves.
Yeah. And this is the thing, it's not just you. It's not just you. This is how they approach any parent. It doesn't matter about background, class, income, neurology, anything. If you are pursuing any kind of help from a local authority, NHS or anybody, and that means that they've got to spend money or time or resources, this is what you're going to come up against. Just expect it. But yeah, if back to the question, the educational psychologist is there to assess your child. You're actually going to have more credibility by not saying that you're autistic than you are. But also we have to look at where that's coming from. So this kind of autistic parent to child abuse thing, because a lot of it's pushed under emotional abuse. Now, you got to look at these people's training. They've had no training budgets. I know there's certain departments in the NHS where they've completely gone. So their training is all going to be based on the old deficit theory of mind. So it's not a difficult assumption to think from an educational psychologist, oh, all they know about autism is we have no empathy. Autistic people have no empathy. So therefore we are emotionally abusing our children. And then the separation between reactive attachment disorder and autism, because we don't know what an untraumatized autistic person looks like. It's no surprise that we're in this state, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it leads into another Tanya-shaped question that we have. We have some more random type questions as well, but we'll do another Tanya-shaped question while we're here and on this topic, which was somebody who I know wanted to cut to the webinar and, life. But yeah, I thought this question would be relevant for you. So school avoidance issues. Son has got a official diagnosis of anxiety, autism and ADHD. Currently in the process of applying for EHCP, but in the meantime, absences are all going down as unauthorised. The GP had given a letter saying that the child's got anxiety, but hadn't said in the letter that they can't attend school because of their anxiety. Son is managing half a day, but then he's needing longer and longer to regulate and recover afterwards.
So my advice as a parent would be pull them out altogether. If mental and physical health have legal parity, why as a parent would you want to just traumatize your... So let me bring this back. What we've got to do is, the assumption is that every child is able to access a full-time suitable education. So this is where the issue with flexi schooling and stuff comes in with the law, because they say that if this education is suitable, then your child should be able to access it full time. So when we turn that back around on parents, we go, if this education is traumatic for my child 5 days a week, why do I want them in there half a day a week to just traumatize them a bit less? That's always the question I ask. Reference pulling them out, you're well within your legal right to do that. You have evidence of mental health. They can be away from school for mental ill health. It's sometimes convenient and helpful for schools to authorize those absences, because then when you face parent blame later on, you can go, well, actually, this was authorized, but it doesn't matter if not. If you've got that GP letters, local authorities have to, they can't demand that it's got to be a tier 4 consultant or anything like that. That's actually in breach of their own law. They've got to look at other evidence as well. And the fact that the diagnosis is already there and the GP has said, this child has anxiety, and you're going through the EHCP process is evidence enough. It doesn't mean that the local authority won't bully you and threaten you, but if you do get a fine that drops through your door, one of the defenses is that your child was absent by way of illness, and you've got a GP letter that says your child is experiencing anxiety, which is mental illness. So you're pretty much golden, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to stop slinging stuff at you. But what you do from there, which can sometimes speed up the EHCP process, is once your child's absent for more than 15 days, you can pursue the local authority to provide alternative education.
Right.
And that can sometimes speed up the EHCP process, or at least get them, some kind of mentoring. I know Gecko do a lot of that stuff as well. It could be forest school, it could be home ed groups, it could be anything like that the local authority will then fund. And you're collecting more evidence, because these people are quite often run by really experienced people. So some of the reports that Gecko write are really useful. So there's another option as well, but it also keeps them, because the thing is, it can really kill a child's love of learning. And for an autistic person, I don't know about you guys, but I would say that what I know from being autistic is we constantly need to be learning. You know, we constantly need to be absorbing and growing, especially when we're children. I mean, children are sponges. They're designed to be like that, never mind with with autistic neurology. So I would definitely keep that up if they're able to access it. But yeah, it's just the local authority and the schools. Schools don't know any different. This is the thing. So schools are so beholden to local authorities for funding, because we're sat here, you know, with a privileged position that none of us would mind fighting for any HCP, and we may have the resources, whether that's financial or mental, to be able to do that. You know, for every one parent that can do that, there's probably 20 others that can't. So schools don't have any right of appeal against local authorities, which puts them in the precarious position of always having a begging bowl out to the local authority constantly. So they're really, really, even if they're academies, they don't want to upset the apple cart with them. Because, so they, even though you can show them the law, if the EWO has said no, that's it, their word's gospel, they don't want to upset them.
Yeah.
What about the recording as unauthorized absences? If the child's got anxiety, they're they're sick, they're ill, aren't they? So
yeah, I mean, it's a detail, but ultimately, and this is what I tell parents all the time, and it's really difficult with, you know, being neurodivergent, to not look at things that are wrong and go, this is not this, you've got to keep your eyes on the prize. Now, it does help and it should be that way, but realistically, if you've got that evidenced in other ways, it doesn't matter what's going to happen to you. And that's what we've got to think about. The entire process is so knackering, for want of a better word, and dehumanizing and demoralizing and expensive in various different ways, that we have to be able to zoom out, focus on what we need, and only really engage with the things that's going to get us that, or that we have to. And that's really hard for autistic parents, because it's not about fair, and you have to let go of fair. You know, laws, policies, etc., got nothing to do with justice.
No. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I was talking with some autistic parents this week about kind of I started off by saying, look, you know, if you're going through EHCP process, trying to sort out child's education, it's quite complicated, then make sure you're looking after yourself. You know, if you've got a hobby or an interest or whatever, make sure you're dedicating some time to that. And then I thought, not everybody is able to do that. So it might be more about exchanging. It might be more about, rather than saying, look, you know, have a bubble bath, you know, spend an hour a week listening to podcasts or knitting or whatever it is that is your jam. It might be more about, don't do the housework. And if you've got the financial means to pay a cleaner to come in, then pay a cleaner instead of doing stuff yourself. You know, whatever little jobs it is that you do that you don't have to do, drop all of them.
Yeah, you know, that's exactly the advice. That's exactly the advice that I give to parents. And I work a lot with Mary Cartledge, who's an independent social worker. And she uses me as a consultant, really, so we can make sure that we've got the most up-to-date information. So we get asked to work on particularly complex things, which I just think it means they don't know what they're talking about, but there we go. And 9 times out of 10, when there are parents, autistic parents specifically, that have multiple neurodivergent children, I'm not saying that we need PAs in there or someone to take over the parenting, because the thing is, nobody knows your children more than you do. And if your children are struggling, I always think of it like this, you know, if you've got a baby that's not sleeping through the night, you don't bring a PA in from the local authority for £10 an hour to get up with them in the night, because that's going to create more of a problem. You know, they want their safe people. So actually, you know, half the recommendations that I always make is for housekeepers, cleaners, somebody to do the shopping. And because that's much more helpful. So your monotropic focus can become your children when it needs to be. I would say that that's working to your autistic strengths. I have a housekeeper, cleaner, person who does the shopping. I have to, because I can't parent and uni and work and also be a cleaner and a housekeeper. And if I wanted to do that, I'd have a business doing that.
It's reducing the demands on yourself, isn't it? It's logical, and it's actually, you know, this is something I've talked about a lot in the last few weeks, that actually comparing being a parent to having a business. Now, as someone who has a business, I can't do everything in that business. You know, I need someone to file my accounts, and I need someone to do fancy graphic stuff and things, and maybe do stuff on computers because I'm useless at them, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. Like, I'm good at this bit, and the gabbing, not all the technical stuff behind the scenes. And it's so, when you have a business, it's okay to have other people come in and do certain things, or to find another business that does things like that. So why, as a parent, you know, we've kind of maybe got to the point where having a cleaner isn't as taboo as it used to be, and isn't a thing that you're embarrassed about and have to hide. So, you know, why can't other aspects? I know Christy Forbes, I was doing a training with Christy Forbes the other week, and we were talking about the fact that she has someone come in and folds her washing for her and puts it away, because that's a huge barrier for her and such a huge demand on her. And what that's done has created so much headspace in her that she can spend more time with her kids and be more positive with her kids. And, you know, so it's about taking the stuff away that we can control, because there's so many demands on us as parents that we have no control over. But there are lots of things that we do have control over. And if we can try and either get someone to help us with something, or just don't do it. You know, if the house isn't tidy, who cares? You know, it's not a huge thing. I mean, it can become a huge thing if it's left for too long, but just reduce the demands where you can, and take those little bits of control back where you can.
Yeah. For me, I got to crisis point and ended up contacting social services. And I don't like asking for help. I'm not good at asking for help. I'm not good at describing what help I might need or why I'm struggling. And I'm not very good at showing that I'm struggling, because I'm so good at masking to avoid the unwanted attention that I've grown up to realise is not what I want, you know. And I've now got 17 hours direct payments, and I can use that money to employ whoever I want to, whoever works for me, and they do basically all of the housework, or teamwork, as in things that I can do, but there are parts of that job that I can't do because of the executive functioning difficulties that I have. So like you said, you know, folding laundry, I can't do that, because like someone will go, you're not daft, and I'm like, no, it's like autistic spiky profile. And they go, what's that? I was like, okay, so I can interpret simultaneously between two languages with ease, doesn't bother me, but I can't fold laundry. And then they go,
yeah, my arch nemesis is duvet covers. Honestly, that's an instant meltdown for me. I can't do it. I won't do it. Like, I just give up. But you know what? I'm a disabled adult. I am a disabled adult. It is not a dirty word. No. I need help. And okay.
Sorry, I'm just aware that and we touch upon this, I know we end up touching upon this in every live, that we are a group of white people. Most of us are coupled, and reasonable, probable degrees of fairly middle class. And I don't know any of your bank accounts, so I'm making some assumptions there, but ish. And certainly the topic that we're talking about here, we're talking about hiring cleaners and having people to help. Not everybody is in that situation where they can afford to have people just come in and help them with stuff. Where do you think that kind of fits in, if you're a single person or you're a family on a lower income and you can't afford to pay people to come in and do this stuff for you?
Yeah, so you've got options such as PIP, so you've got things like that. You've got children's DLA. Direct payments may be something that are accessible to you, but again, you've got to go and get through social care for that. You know, via an EHCP as well, they're quite useful as well, especially if there's any PA hours, you've got access to work. There are lots of different avenues available. But yeah, it's just kind of, for me as well, it's playing to your strengths and knowing your own needs. You know, I don't do clutter. The reason I don't do clutter is because I'm a massively untidy person. So I will literally go through phases of just throwing things out that I don't need. And it's just kind of, it's just learning to be authentically autistic and find things that work for you. Same as with parenting, when we look at low demand parenting or neurodivergent parenting and how it is completely different. You just kind of build these things in, it just happens. And it's more of like so for me, neurodivergent living is, if the sky didn't fall in, I'm not going to panic about it. You know, it's that attitude really. And that's really what I teach all my parents. But yeah, it is difficult. I mean, I'm a single mum. You know, the person that's registered as one of my children. So for example, if you have multiple children, autistic, you can access DLA for both of them. You know, the person that does all my housework, childcare, etc., is my stepbrother. He's registered as my child's carer, and that's perfectly legal. He gets paid for doing that, a bit of money for doing that, and then a bit more. So there are options available.
Yeah, and it's, I think, when we're using examples about bringing people in, it's not even about bringing people in. That's if you can do that, that's the thing to think about. And if you're not in a position to do that, I mean, for a very long time, we've been a very, very low income, below breadline household, who have relied heavily on benefits and all of those kind of things, and have lots of debt to deal with still because of that. So coming at this from a place of, again, what can you control? What's your sphere of influence here? What do you have control over? And are there, even if it's, I can't bring someone in because I can't afford it, or I haven't got an avenue to support in that way, well, then what little things can you do for yourself? If you can't have an hour to yourself, can you have 3 minutes to yourself, which is more than maybe what you gave yourself before? It's just grasping for those little things. And if in order to capture those little small moments, you do need to drop something else, maybe think about priorities. What's important, what isn't important? As Tanya said, is the sky going to fall in if a certain thing doesn't get done, or if it doesn't get done today? Can I take more time for myself if I do that thing tomorrow? Or, you know, and there's always going to be an element of maybe kicking the can down the road, but further down the road, maybe you might have more spoons because you've enabled yourself to re-energize today. So the more pressure we put on ourselves, the less energy we're going to have to be able to deal with things. So if we can just even reduce that pressure just a fraction, just a tiny bit in some way or shape or form, then it's going to benefit us.
Yeah. Don't buy clothes that need ironing. That's one rule in my house.
Iron? What's that?
That's mine too. Yeah. My kids live in t-shirts and buttons. Yeah, I very occasionally get the iron out.
Everyone's fiddling with their clothes now.
I hate it. I hate ironing with an absolute fiery passion.
We've had mine for 15 years and it's still in the box with a seal on it.
Yeah. See, no, it's not something. What were you going to say, Rachel? Were you going to say you love it now?
No, I just said just don't iron the seal that's sitting on it. Sorry, my.
Oh, it did, yeah, it doesn't actually have a seal sitting on it. That would be cruel and unusual.
Greenpeace would be right up.
Yeah, I'd literally have a boat outside my house, wouldn't I?
Where do you live? That would be even funnier.
That's it. We do need to obviously be thinking about, when we're talking about these things, there'll always be compromise wherever anybody's at there. There'll always be compromise, won't there? And we've talked about what kept coming into my mind there. So I was bribing my children to go away with chocolate because I'm a very, very good parent. But what was coming into my mind, where both of you were talking there, was that phrase that I know we've spoken about before towards the children, which is, does it really matter? And it's applying that same principle to your own life, isn't it? Does it really matter? Can it wait another day? Can it wait another 2 days? can I reach out for anybody else to help me do this instead?
Yeah. And again, with the acknowledgement that there are people in really dire situations who are being constantly looked at and have different professionals in their house 5 times a day. And, you know, so it's all in degrees, and it's all very much individual and based on your personal kind of context of what's going on. But it's just those tiny seconds. If we can free up some time just for ourselves in some way, even if it's just to sit on the toilet and read a page of a book, you know, just those little tiny things.
Who here hasn't locked themselves in the bathroom for at least 5 minutes? Because I know I have.
Yeah, it is all that little stuff, isn't it? But personally, for me, no, my children are absolutely have to have an open toilet door, but I can go in the washing machine cupboard, which is where I store all the chocolate, because the washing machine is loud and boring, but it is also where my chocolate
when
is.
when I was a stay-at-home dad, and we're very lucky to have a door between our kitchen and dining room and our living room. So I used to say, I'm just going to hoover the kitchen and shut the door, turn the hoover on and go and sit in the dining room for 10 minutes, you know, just to shut the door in there as well, so I could block out the noise so much. But it just, because none of them like the hoover and they didn't want to be around the hoover. So it just gave me that break to be able to kind of step away just for a few minutes.
That's it. Use the hoover.
And they were like, Dad, how clean is that kitchen? You've hoovered 15 times today.
I know we've spoken about this before as well, that of also, particularly as autistic parents ourselves, if your children are also neurodivergent, how important it is to be honest and to be able to say and give them the language. I am overwhelmed right now, so I'm just going to sit down with this cup of tea and watch this rubbish TV program, and I would really appreciate it if you could have 10 minutes on your tablet or a book or the garden or whatever it is that keeps
your children happy. Are not PDAs, are they?
They are, but we have bribery systems and it doesn't always work, but there are just times, and over time as well, we have got more of an understanding and more of an acceptance around that language of, this is, you know, how you feel when you are completely overwhelmed. That's how I feel right now, and I'm not biting you because I am a grown-up, but I feel the same amount of overwhelmed and I need 10 minutes. Obviously I don't in the middle of my child's meltdowns. I will do it at a convenient time of like, I just need a break.
That's part of modeling good boundaries as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. You know, we are actually setting examples for our children on how to be neurodivergent. So community is really important in that as well. So, you know, neurotypicals are everywhere, so they know how to neurotypical. They're surrounded by them. You know, they get hints and tricks about neurotypicaling from each other in school and so on and so forth. So community is really important. Just sharing little tips like don't do ironing, you know, do X, Y, Z. If they need to sleep in your bed to sleep, that's fine. Yeah, everybody sleeps. Things like that, you know, community is really important for that as well. But yeah, just the little things, get it where you can.
We had a lovely message come through actually from somebody who's watched a few of these lives and said that after watching a few, she felt much more at peace to allow her kids to eat their meals in front of screens, because it meant that everybody ate them peacefully and was quite happy, rather than feeling like she had to have meals around the table, you know, that kind of thing. It's gorgeous, isn't it? And I know with my kids do that. My kids eat meals in front of screens, and what I found was they don't particularly eat if they don't have screens because they get bored.
What I found with a lot of autistic parents, particularly who are kind of maybe coming at this, finding out about themselves very late on, or you know, this is all new for them, that a lot of it is that they know in their gut what they need to do, and they know in their gut that it's okay for their kid not to come and sit at the table, but that peer pressure, and that social pressure, which you have been kind of trying to conform to and project your acceptable self to for the whole of your life, and then all of a sudden your gut's like going, no, that's not right, so there's that disconnect between what's going on, and sometimes all they need is just permission from someone to just say it's okay.
It's just that.
And from someone who's experienced the same thing, it's okay not to do that. You don't have to do that. They don't have to sit at the table. It's okay if they have their tablet. It's okay for those things to happen. Just because the world says that it isn't, doesn't mean it's wrong. And that's, you know, it's whatever's right for you in that moment.
Go on, Rachel.
I definitely agree with that, because it was Dr. Luke Bearden who said to me, well, surely being slightly late for school is a reasonable adjustment. And I was like, I'm so glad you're saying that, because nobody else has said it to me. And I was saying I think this is a reasonable adjustment. And then I'd got like people close to me saying, no, you have to get there on time. Otherwise, you know, or you're affecting other people. And I'm like, but I'm not getting there on time to be annoying. I'm not getting there on time because of my disabilities, and to not allow me that flexibility is as bad as something physical that would be in my access, you know. But I don't, why people can't, you know, go.
That commentary comes from people who are not disabled and who aren't dealing with disabled children as well. So as a disabled person dealing and supporting with disabled children, you've got the double whammy there of it being extra difficult. So if you're late, you're late. It's sorry, it's your problem, not my problem.
I did right. If I tried to get there on time, it impacted all of my family. And I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not subjecting everyone to me ranting and raving about being there on time, because I'm not appeasing you guys. I'm not meeting your needs, and you're the people that I'm responsible for, not the people at school. If my lateness is causing them problems, then I will apologise, because my disability is never an excuse, it's an explanation. But I always have to try to fight, and in my internal dialogue has to say it's okay for people to disagree, because I've grown up obviously masking and just appeasing people and liking what they like, and basically mirroring everything, and you know, every single sense, just to try to appear to fit in, which still didn't, but and now I'm starting to go, right, okay, this doesn't belong to me, neither does this, okay. And it's like Tanya was saying about having a clear out. It's almost like having a physical clear out of the house, decluttering, but also decluttering the masking layers and saying, right, what's useful, what isn't useful, what's useful to me, you know, what's useful to use occasionally to help, you know, navigate a situation that maybe I'm not ready for, you know, having a plan B, you know, and just things like that really have been an absolute game changer for my family. And I think I've probably created a massive wedge in the way the autistic people.
Yeah. It's worst case scenario thinking is really useful, even though that doesn't sound useful. But specifically when you've been masking for quite a while, if you do not get your children on school on time, what is the worst case scenario? You're going to have a disgruntled Senko.
Yeah.
So
I had an email from schools saying to me, because I kept asking them, you know, please stop. They were basically chastising me and putting a lot of pressure on because I was being late. And I was just saying, but I'm not being late on purpose.
Yeah, and this is where the thing is, you've got to not explain, because when you start explaining, it automatically puts you on the back foot, and it's really hard to do when you're fawning. But, you know, again, like we said before, we are setting examples. So we need to really normalise using reasonable adjustments as our right. It's our legal right. You know, I'm not asking for anything that massively inconveniences other people. If we get there late, we get there. What would you prefer? Do you want a melting down child arriving at 9, or would you like...
Or no child at all?
Yeah, or no child at all, or would you like a perfectly happy child and a less stressed out mum line arriving at 9:30? So actually, I think, you know, before we came on, we were talking about the constant like excuse making and apologising against the, actually, I'm not going to explain myself. I don't legally have to offer an explanation. I'm an autistic adult. My children are neurodivergent. We need this as a reasonable adjustment. If you have a problem with it, please take it up with the Equality Act. Done. And that sounds really difficult to do, but the worst case scenario is really that you're going to get emails from Senko and school, when really, actually, if you do that assertiveness, and the other thing that I try and teach parents a lot, especially neurodivergent parents, you don't have to lose the plot to be assertive. you know, we're constantly put in this kind of, because we're masking and fawning and trying to people please and this, that and the other, the realization that came to me quite late on in life is that actually I can be assertive without having to be wound up emotionally to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the sweet spot. That's when it comes to handling local authorities, teachers. You know, if you can get that lesson that actually, no, this is how it is, this is the law, keep it short, sweet and simple, goodbye. That helps.
Yes, thank you. That's really useful, actually.
It is. I think that's what I've always found. The only time I can be assertive is when I am fully enraged.
Yeah.
And almost no other point. That actually brings us to one of our questions that we had as well. It's a slightly different topic, but going in with the kind of assertiveness. So we've had a question come through saying, how do you maintain space in a friendship group when uncomfortable speaking about people without their knowledge? The person is getting themselves in trouble by being too upfront with their thoughts because they don't want to talk about people behind their backs, but then getting drawn into gossiping and then feeling the need to disclose what's been said. I think that this is kind of neurodivergent versus neurotypical communication styles, isn't it? And even if you've got a friendship group that's all neurodivergent, if they've grown up communicating in a neurotypical style, I think sometimes we need to unteach ourselves, don't we? So what would you do with that kind of situation?
Yeah, I'm terrible at friends. I don't know about you lot.
Yeah, I think I'd struggle to be in a position where that would even actually happen to me, because I wouldn't be around people like that. I don't like people who gossip like that, and that's not to say that I don't talk to people about other people, but when it gets to the point of being uncomfortable, that would be, no, I'm out now, bye. That's it. And and that probably sounds very black and white, but I have got to a point in my life where I've cut out the people who are like that. I don't talk to people like that anymore, and don't put myself in a position where I have to be. And again, if you do find yourself in those positions, this is one of the standard tactics for autistic people, is always have an escape route, always have one in reserve. And no matter where you're going, what you're doing, always have an opportunity to extract yourself. Even if you have you can set alarms on your phone, you can set the phone to ring you, oh, my phone's ringing. You can pretend it's vibrating in my pocket, my phone's ringing, I need to leave now. That kind of thing. Just use something to get yourself out of that situation if you find yourself in it. Yeah. But I know I'm reaching there because it's not a position I find myself in anymore.
I think a good measure of that is,
nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah, a good measure of that is, would these people say this about this person when they were present? And if the answer is no, then just say, I'm really uncomfortable having this conversation. Obviously, if it's something you feel you need to discuss with this person, then do that. I feel that you should get it off your chest. Especially, but I'm not the right person.
Ruth shrunk. Especially if you're finding yourself then in a position where you're having to disclose to that person, they're being really unfair on you by doing that. That's putting you in a position, and that's yeah, I would
you
cut
can
those
be really
people out if possible.
Honest as well. I tend to embrace the bluntness and go, look, if we're going to talk about this person, it's going to put me in a really awkward position where I'm going to feel bad about it, so I'd rather not.
Yeah,
it's okay to say that.
Yeah,
because that's coming back to being assertive without being aggressive or angry.
Or mean or whatever. Yeah. You're going to jump in.
We have a question. Everyone, just back to the assertiveness. How can you learn to be assertive when you've masked for so long? I feel like I can't cope with being assertive without explaining or apologising. Any tips for Elaine?
Define what assertive means to you. I think it's such a weird concept. Assertive doesn't necessarily mean being bolshy or overly confident or this, that, and the other. You can, a curiosity approach is really good for being assertive. So think about, I use PDA tactics on neurotypicals all the time. Lay the crumbs, lead them to water, let them do, so you think about, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just wondering if because of X, Y, and Z, this might be better. And I think that's the decision that I'm going to make. So the curiosity approach really works, you know, or can you explain your rationale behind your thinking? Because I'm not really following, I don't understand, because I think this and I'm going to do this. So you don't, and you know, so thinking of sentence starters is really, you know, that's a good one to start with.
Yeah, using your scripts. And I actually found, kind of based on that, I did that with myself. I practiced that on myself. I questioned why I was thinking about certain things in a certain way and tried to dissect that in order to kind of understand why I was doing that. And then that enabled me to think, well, actually, what I'm doing isn't right. I need to find a better answer to that, because the answer that I've got to that question isn't good enough. And it's like anything with kind of, you know, we don't take masks off, we don't demask, we don't stop masking, we take control. We learn about ourselves and we learn about we identify the barriers that are in front of us and learn about how we can move around those barriers, or what we can do in order to put things in place in our sphere of control, so that we can navigate those barriers better. And that's the more you do that, the more you understand yourself, the more you figure out actually who in your life is not a good influence on you and who is, and you kind of start putting little tiny boundaries in, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So it's not something, you can't just wake up one morning and like, ta-da, I'm going to be confident and assertive and people are going to listen to me. But it's more about actually a developmental thing over time, because you've spent however many years under the cosh of masking, and it's going to take however many years to come out from under the cosh of masking. It's not something that you just wake up the next morning and go bing. So like Tanya said, to be assertive, you need to know what that means for you in your context, and that might change over time. It might become that you do become more confident and your assertiveness matches up to what everybody's conceptualization of what assertiveness is, you know, being confident and being loud and brash and whatever, and not giving a stuff about anybody else. But right now it might be smaller things that you do that help that assertiveness develop itself.
I totally agree with that. And the thing that comes to mind is what, again, Dr. Luke Bearden said, that if you create basically a set of basic rules, as in boundaries, as in when you conduct yourself and when you're on the receiving end of data information, that you have your own set of criteria that works for you, so that you always feel that you're doing what you believe is morally and ethically correct, and that you're put up with what those people are doing, and that you have, again, a set of criteria of what you're willing to put up with. And so by doing that, you're not having to blindly navigate the map and go, right, what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and actually say, well, what do I think is and isn't allowed, and kind of maybe choose one particular area to practice something on in a safe situation, to help train your brain to realize that, you know, you're not suddenly going to fall down the well because you've tried to be assertive. And also that there'll be days where you don't feel that you can be assertive, and that's okay. It's like an ebb and flow that all humans have, not just autistic people, and humans who have experienced trauma are likely to have these ebbing and flowing and happening maybe in more extreme, what's the word I'm looking for? Extreme levels, maybe. But yeah, just to only compare yourself only with who you were yesterday. And if yesterday is too far away, then maybe just an hour ago or 2 hours ago, or don't compare yourself to anybody else, because you are a unique version of you, and there has been and there will never be another person like you.
Yeah, and this is learning to navigate trauma and learning to sit with your trauma and recognizing what your trauma is, because so many people, you know, it's so big that people can't compartmentalize it. And you know, I was talking to someone yesterday who was talking about the fact that they'd done a really big thing, a huge thing in their life, and they felt deflated afterwards because there was no sense of achievement. almost like they'd thought they'd get to like the end of a level in a game and there'd be fireworks going off and, you know, this is your achievement, but they felt the same after it. It was like, oh yeah, I've done this thing, but actually now there's just more things to do, because it's continuous. And it's the same thing with this, in terms of when you take control over little aspects of your life that you didn't have control over before, that development occurs, but you probably won't even recognize it happening. In 5 years' time, you might wake up and think, oh, actually, I've completely changed from the person I was 5 years ago. And that has happened over the course of time, and you've been dissociated from it. But it's because of the work that you've done and the things that you've done. And to make that happen, those little tiny things all add up to big changes. And it can happen, and it does happen, but it always comes back to understanding yourself, understanding your challenges and your barriers, and then working out ways of maneuvering around them based on not changing who you are, which sounds really bizarre, but this is about taking control of your environment, not taking control of what's going on in you as best you can, like with the getting a cleaner in or finding 3 minutes of time or whatever. This is all, it's all part and parcel of the same process. It's all just taking control of little things as best you can, and those little things make big change.
Can I just add? Sorry.
Well, yeah, please.
Just what Kieran said, just to add, something that helped me massively was that the trauma that's happened, to realise that it was never about me personally. That was a real game changer for me, to help me kind of offload, you know, these, you know, it's chronic post-traumatic stress disorder because there are so many that you can't actually separate them, you know. So for me to kind of go, okay, so looking back on the school years, realising it wasn't about me, that it would have happened to anybody who was different to extent as what was, you know, the majority was accepting as acceptable. I don't know if that helps anybody, but it did massively help me, that it was never about me personally. It was just circumstantial and difference and fear and, you know, basic human responses to that. So yeah. Anyway.
I have two really pieces of practical advice when it comes to, especially working with newly discovered autistic people. One is that you can practice is stop giving instant responses. So start bringing in the, I'm going to go away and process that, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Oh, I need to think about that. Oh, I'm not quite sure right now. Because when you stop feeling the need to give those instant responses, it allows you processing time. So that's a really useful one. And the other thing that we tend to do a lot of is we kind of almost gaslight and try and intellectualize our instincts, because we've been taught not to trust them and we've been invalidated a lot. So for me, and you know, that causes problems with interoception and alexithymia as well. So for me, one of the biggest things that I say to people is, if you for any reason feel unsafe in a situation, don't sit in it going, oh, is this right? Am I just being this? Am I just being that? Just exit stage left, just leave, and then do the thinky bit later. So those would be my two things. Normalize not giving instant responses. And if it's at all possible, if you feel unsafe or your spidey senses are tingling or you can't be there, don't sit in it and tell yourself that you're wrong or trying to figure out why you might be feeling this way. Just exit stage left and then do the thinking.
Yeah.
Oh,
to follow from that second point, I would always say, go and tell another autistic person that you trust about it as well, because you'll find validation there, and they will go, no, your gut instinct was right there. And because you can then overthink it afterwards. Did I leave too early? What was I thinking? Was I just panicking? And did I give up on this? So someone will always come and validate you on that as well. So that will be just an extension of that.
Yeah. And I don't know if this has already been said. I had chaos, so needed to step away for a moment. But going into your first point there, Tanya, around being assertive, is at the beginning, do it in writing, yes, rather than doing it actually speaking and doing it out loud, where we can stumble over our words, or do the typical neurodivergent thing of just keep talking, just keep filling the void with words until they give in, to put it in writing, because then you can check with a friend, you can if you're in our group, you can come and put it on our group. But you can check with a group of people and say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking of sending in relation to this circumstance. Is this okay? Does it come across too harsh? Is it not clear? Is it not harsh enough? Kind of where am I leaning tone wise? And it's what I find this a lot. It keeps coming up, doesn't it, in a lot of the neurodivergent groups, that a lot of neurodivergent kids prefer to communicate and socialize online. And it's because of that. It's because you can stop and think about it, and you're typing messages. My eldest particularly is really into just doing everything on Discord, but you can type a message, and if you get overwhelmed, you just stop, you just go offline, you're gone. And nobody thinks anything of it. It's so much more of a neurodivergent friendly communication style, is to do things in writing nice and slowly, and then not. And again, if somebody sends you an assertive message, to do the opposite, sit with it a little while.
Don't respond straight away. But like we've covered before as well, even if you found yourself in a situation where you maybe have overtalked or you have not been assertive, you can still follow that up, if it's a professional, with an email saying, I just wanted to clarify the points I was making because I didn't make them well enough when I was talking to you. Or just to clarify what we discussed in our meeting, bullet point the things that you found important in that meeting and that you want followed up. So it doesn't, just because a situation has occurred does not mean it's not redeemable afterwards in some way.
Yeah. I was saying before, Ruth, about I text, and I did this before I knew I was autistic. And I remember phones coming out and being able to text, and that's all I ever did was text. And it was just like, wow, this is amazing. But yeah, if I've got something that I'm struggling to articulate, or I'm feeling under threat and feeling unsure of, oh gosh, my thing's gone.
We can still hear you. It's fine. Yeah.
When I'm texting to say how I'm feeling, like you say, Ruth, I can read through it and go, right, yeah, okay. But the one thing that I do notice that I do that I know a lot of people do this, is I type trigger happy, send, then I read it. I'm like, what are you doing? Then I go, you can't do that on Twitter. So when I'm on Twitter, I'm like, type, check. Because I remember before I wrote to somebody and I said, I work with deaf people, but my autocorrect said dead people. What type of job do you do? Is it like the makeup artist or something? I'm like, what do you mean? No, deaf people. Oh, right. Yeah, so yeah, it can be, both ways.
Bullet point emails are fantastic.
Right.
Like ADHD, bullet point and short paragraphs. So I think practicing Twitter for getting your point small, and that's why I don't use Twitter very often, because I can't get the point small. But that's really useful. So I just tend to bullet point emails in, and also you've got to think about what you're trying to achieve from it. So start at the end and then work backwards.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I find it really frustrating that when I'm trying to explain myself and I read it and I go, yeah, that's great, and then I send it to somebody and then they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so upset. And I'm like, holy moly, what? That's not what I intended. And I'm just like, I get so frustrated because I just think they're just I'm a person, but I'm not. The message actually meant this, but then they don't believe you. And I'm like, oh my God, right. If you just don't want to accept that I'm a lovely person, and maybe this message is like confirming your self-fulfilling prophecy of what you want me to be.
That sounds like a them problem, Rachel, not a you.
It does, yeah, completely. It's quite common, particularly amongst non-autistic people, to read stuff that isn't actually written on whatever you've written, or to take something you've written, ignore all the kind of exclamation marks and question marks or whatever, and just add their own in. And it happens a lot. That misinterpreting, like we're the ones that get accused of bad communication all the time. But
where does it say that?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a very similar incident recently where certain professionals are involved now. Tanya knows what I'm talking about, where questions that I have asked have been taken as statements, even though they've got question marks on the end of them. People infer what they're going to infer, and you've got no control over how someone else is going to understand what you've written. As long as you have written it clearly, and as long as it's put out and set out exactly, then they shouldn't have much of a comeback.
There are 100 million reasons to be anxious, and you know, it sounds really awful. You know, it's an old thing that we say, what other people think of us is really none of our business. And I suppose, and it's really easy for me to sit here and say, don't worry about what other people think, because you have to a certain degree, especially when you're dealing with professionals. But if you don't have to worry about, just worry about the evidence and the information that you give in, because, you know, you are neurodivergent. You know, there is the double empathy problem exists. We know that. No amount of worrying about what somebody else may perceive you as. And I guarantee that that's probably going to be wrong as well, because you're coming at it with a bit of rejection sensitivity from years and years of invalidation and trauma. So you got to kind of, the only other option is not communicate, you know, as long as what you have said is concise and clear and cannot be legally misinterpreted, you're good.
Yeah. I think the frustrating thing I find is that as a community, there's still divide within that community, and it makes me think, are we basically just like cells that just keep dividing? You know, no matter what group you take it down to, that group will almost more than likely create its own divide. And that's what I find really frustrating, because I'm just like, you've created this, you know, this didn't have to happen. Why has it happened? It's almost like, is it because people want the drama? Because I know it's not an autistic thing, it's a human thing, because it happens wherever wherever you're sort of like groups of people, a divide always seems to happen.
I think
what?
It goes back to early man, where it made sense for us to live in familial groups. And so within that, we had to have the context of this is our group and that is their group. And if we go and forage berries or catch wild squirrel or whatever, it's for our group and that's their thing.
It's a competitive threat, isn't it?
That's it, we keep it going, and of course now in modern society it isn't about foraging berries and catching squirrels as much as it's about your opinion on X or Y or Z, and you have to be here or you have to be there and you can't be anywhere grey. And we see it within our fiction, don't we? We see it within our fiction, which tells so much about where a society is, that there's good people and bad people. And when you try and break it down into the real world, it doesn't work. Nobody is like that. Everybody is grey. And some people are dark grey and some people are pale grey, but everybody is grey. Nobody has a clean sheet. And I think that we should be in a place in society where we can fit that in our heads, that people can disagree with you but still be a good person. But it doesn't happen a lot. And certainly online as well, it exacerbates it to be a this and a that rather than a okay.
I think it's important to remember that notion of community as well, that when we talk about community, that doesn't mean that everybody has to do things the same way, or because that then falls into the problems that we hit as autistic people generally, that, you know, that's our argument, that not everybody has to do things in the same way, and that there are the autistic community as a whole. When we talk about the autistic community, people often think, well, that means the circle of people that I am aware of, but it doesn't. That incorporates lots and lots of people all over the world, some of whom will think very differently to us, but that doesn't mean that they're not part of our community. There are people that think in ways that I think are extremely horrible, but it doesn't mean that they're not part of a community. They're just a different facet of that community. And the things that connect us, the things that we relate to, are still there, even though we vehemently disagree with the way that people think or the way that people act and the things that people do. So when we talk about those divides, it's really important to remember that as much as, yes, there might be differences of opinion or differences of communication, but there's still things that connect us as well. We're still part of the same group, whether or not we agree or whether we hit barriers, cultural barriers, we're still collectively part of the same community. So, you know, looking, as much as recognizing that there are divisions, we also have to recognize that there are reasons to connect us as well. Otherwise, it is just out and out war, which is ridiculous. And it's however we're looking. But yeah, it's unfortunate, as Ruth was saying, that sense of tribalism, that sense of competitiveness is now reinforced by the structures that are around us, the economic structures, the political structures, the fact that we have borders, imaginary lines across land, and all of those kind of things, that divide us and separate us, and rather than recognizing the things that we have in common with each other. Humans are messed up massively.
Yeah. I like dogs. They're much better.
Yeah.
You're all saying
that we all prefer dogs, really, when you get right down to it. I'll just check before we finish up. Jules, is there anything? Jules has put, do you want to say this out loud, darling, what you put in the chat?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a great generalisation, but I find neurotypical people generally don't take things in writing with positive intent. They're always searching for negative intent, and I'm told constantly that I'm naive because I don't see negative intent unless it's really explicit. It's constantly, well, she knows what she's doing, or he knows what he's doing when he's writing that, or he's worded it like that, and you just think, well, I'm just reading the words and taking them literally, so unless it's really explicit, I'm not searching for that negative intent. I find that with stuff that I write, it's not what I've written, it's the way that somebody's taken it. So we haven't got any more questions, but we have some really nice comments. So thank you for Elaine for asking the assertiveness question and answering that. We've got quite a lot. Recommendations to go and look at the autistic pragmatic language hypothesis, double empathy problem, which we've talked about. The great one about saying, I need time to process, and lots of people have got that. That's a brilliant tip. Just, someone said, I can't even take me 44 years, but I'm going to use that from Emma. And Not Naughty said it's important for children to know this too, and to have I don't know as an acceptable response. I don't know, I need time to process, and if we teach our children that, then brilliant. So yeah, some really nice feedback there and some good comments, but no more questions that I can see.
Thank you, super. Well, thank you to everybody who joined us online, and thank you to Kieran, Tanya, Jules and Rachel for coming along as well.
Ruth, can I just say, I have totally enjoyed the faces that keep appearing behind you with little naughty little grins on them.
It's because I keep muting and going, please don't, please not in here. Normally, Facebook land, normally my partner is here to shepherd my children, and my partner is very selfishly at a rugby game, so I have no children shepherd. So my children are wild, and I know that my children are being noisy because my neighbours have turned their music up really loud, which is their subtle sign to me that my children are being noisy. Joy.
Sucks to be them, doesn't it?
Neurotypical people, they couldn't just, anyway, there we go. Thank you very, very much for everybody for this evening. Sorry again for the chaos, and we're back in a month. 27th of May is our next one, and do have a look on this page as well, because we've got upcoming webinars with Pete Warmby coming up in May, and then we have got a webinar coming up with Christy Forbes, but I'm not sure that we've got a completely solid date, so I won't say one out loud, but soon. So look out for those. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.